Today's session of our inspiring conversations is graced by a hero in his working vicinity. The man who has served his part as the citizen of this country by providing a vision that has brought the Indian government and technology together. Friends, he joined the Indian Military Academy in 1986 after graduating in commerce, but was destined to be somewhere else. He quit as a captain in 1998 to pursue other interests. He has been the CEO of the National Intelligence Grid, or the NAT Grid, which is an integrated intelligence grid that links the databases of several departments and ministries of the Government of India. A former head of the Mahindra Special Services Group, he also is equipped with the skills of a teacher. Captain Raman teaches leadership at business schools such as the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, Wellinkar Institute of Management Development and Research, Mumbai, and several other institutes. What sets him apart is his out-of-the-box approach. The author of a book, Every Man's War, was published by Random House. These are the people who envisage in becoming great leaders of their minds. We bring you leadership lessons from the armed forces, the tagline so used as by him on his website. It gives the very idea that he is a doer and a believer in whatever he does. The man who has a brain of a computer and the mind of Sherlock Holmes. When the initiative of Inspiring Conversations was launched, Captain Raghu Raman was always on my mind. I am very happy to announce that we are privileged to have him today amongst us to share his wisdom, knowledge and experience. Leadership at 26,000 feet has been his favorite subject on which he speaks all over the world. I have been knowing Captain Raghu Raman for the last 15 years. And it is a pleasure knowing him. Every interaction with him has been a learning experience. His analytical mind, his thought process, his planning, his strategizing is truly amazing. As business leaders, he is one man from whom we can learn a lot, which can definitely boost our business leadership skills. Friends, I present to you once again Captain Raghu Raman. Let's enjoy all our questions to him. And let's enjoy the wisdom that he shares with all of us.
Can we hear a thundering round of applause, please?
So friends, good evening. Nice to see everybody together. I'm sure we are going to have a very interesting session tonight. And there is a lot that this gentleman can inspire. I've been inspired by him for the last 15 years since I know him. This is one gentleman from whom I have learnt a lot, and now I will make sure that you benefit from it. So Captain, we are on the topic of business leadership. So business leadership is a very interesting topic today, and as entrepreneurs, we always face different kind of challenges. Going from your background, you're with the armed forces, then you're with the corporates, and then you worked with the government. So how did you manage the transition as a leader?
Yes, that's kind of, firstly, thanks a ton. Thank you very much. I mean, after listening to the introduction of the audience, I should be the one asking questions and getting answers. So it's the other way around. So Rajesh actually asked a very relevant question, which a lot of people have asked me, that first you were in the army for about 12 years, then you went into the corporate for another 12 years, and then into the government for 5 years. So what was the major difference between each one of them? So the way I look to answer that is, of course, in the army, you knew which side the enemy was, generally. In the remaining two organizations, it's very difficult to make out. So it's a very autocratic style of sort of management. It's a leadership is, you are fundamentally given good teams because the recruitment process is done by somebody else, and there's a very rigorous recruitment process. And by and large, the kind of people you get are good. So a very old saying in the army is that there are no good units or bad units, there are only good leaders or bad leaders. So the onus is on the leadership to extract the best out of the people. And it is all said and done an autocratic style of leadership, where if you give an instruction, by and large, it will get done. Also, in the army, we don't have the problem of Indian army soldiers quitting and joining Pakistani army. That doesn't happen. So, this poaching business will not take place. Moving to the corporate side, where, and all of you probably realize this even now, that those elements of corporate loyalty or, people are in today's world, especially the newer generation, if you want to call it that, their drivers are very different. Commercially, they are far more oriented towards the commercial benefits. So suddenly the drivers change completely. You still have certain tools whereby you can monitor performance, you can reward good performance, you can penalize bad performance, but by and large, it is a much more of a environment which is definitely not autocratic, because if you are too autocratic, then they have many other choices. If you don't look after them, someone else will look after them. That's there. The third environment, which is the government, where you have no tool to, you can't sack a guy because he's permanently in service. Matter of fact, he'll threaten you that I'll go on leave, and he can go for 365 days leave together. So if you mess around with somebody there, and if he just says, okay, I'm putting in my leave, then you will have to sort of cajole him that, It's also an environment where the drivers are very, very different, because there is no material gain. You can't reward a government servant, no matter how exceptionally he performs, his salary will remain exactly the same as the worst performing government servant, because there is no distinction between, there is no material tool, and consensus is the norm. And until you take consensus across the board, nothing much can be done. Actually, we were having a conversation earlier before coming here, where even your timelines, the calibration of your timelines has to change. So what you would think as this is too slow, a decision being taken in the government in about 8 or 9 months is considered very fast. Because the gamut and the range and the implication of that decision impacts 1.2 billion people. And it impacts them in a different manner. Because in the corporate sector, for example, if you buy the share of Mahindra & Mahindra or Reliance or any other corporate, you have taken that call. And if the decision makers in each of these companies I named mess up, you have some accountability, because you have taken a conscious call to buy those shares. But a Government of India decision doesn't work that way, because a citizen doesn't have a choice. He has to be part of, he can only elect a government. But once a decision is being taken, its impact across different spheres is not even imaginable. You can't imagine that if I take this one decision, what will be the impact? So all three are different environments, and they all have very different drivers. And obviously trying an autocratic style in the government is not going to work. Trying a consensual style in the army is definitely not going to work. So it has to be more of an adaptive style in terms of the DNA of the organization and the environment and the task at hand.
So you have been a startup CEO for 3 corporate entities. So how do you think a startup CEO should perform? A startup CEO cannot be a perpetual CEO. Then the wheel moves on. So how did you make that transition happen? And according to you, what should be the core role of a startup CEO?
So we were having a discussion on this a little while earlier. To my mind, the startup CEO's job description is in the term itself, startup. That's the job. So think of it as that, you saw this rocket launch which happened 2 days ago, yesterday or day before. Now this 230-ton rocket has to escape the Earth's velocity, the gravitational velocity. And to my mind, that is the toughest job. The toughest job is to take this 230 tons and push it out into space. Now the startup CEO's job is to do that. The startup CEO's job is not to have an aspiration that I should be the one landing on the moon. Because if he tries to do that, he will not be able to do this job. The crux of any startup is it requires, to my mind, and I'm sure many of you are startup CEOs here and you have gone through, you are sitting here. It requires oodles of energy. It requires a great deal of optimism. And it requires that attitude that we'll figure out a way of how to do it. To my mind, if you were to draw a distinction between a startup entrepreneur and any other, a good example I'll give you is, there's this famous story about a lady who was working in a large multinational corporation and heading it, and one of the, Indra Nui types. And one day, when she went to church, she got a calling from the church. And she suddenly felt that she wanted to work with the church. Now, which meant abandoning her high-profile job, the money it came with, and all of those things. So she was in this doubt, and she kept asking this question to many people. And she found that everybody she spoke to had a different idea. So obviously, her friends who were in the business community said that, why are you doing this? You're doing so well in business. You are slated to be the next head of this the CEO of this company and all that. And if you want to help them, give them some money. But when she spoke to the church would say, we don't need your money, we need your organizational skills. We need the capability that you bring to the table. So she was caught in this mind because she was trying to seek more and more clarity before she gave a commitment. Then one day she finally decided, you know what, I've thought about it enough, and she joins the church. And before soon she realizes she doesn't miss her Lexus that much. She cycles to work, and over a period of time, even her family, friends and all come around. And then she has this very important lesson, insight. And she says that, I was constantly looking for clarity before I gave my commitment. But what I realized, and which is true for startup CEOs, is the moment I gave my commitment, clarity automatically came. So I think for startup CEOs,
Fantastic.
that is the key. To give the commitment and say, I'm going to make it happen. Clarity will automatically come. And I have found this has worked, at least in my life. Even when the last assignment I had, it was a 18 to 24 month assignment when it was set up. How would we go about it? How would we do it? We were all at sea. But we just put 100 days on the board, and we said in 100 days we'll have the plan ready. And we got it done in about 110 odd days. I'm sure if I had put 300 days, it was still got done in 310 odd days. So I think the point is, for a startup CEO, the difference is that they have to give their commitment and figure out a way of how to get clarity. People who seek a lot of clarity before giving commitment rarely make good startup CEOs. They may be great CEOs for a steady state company, but for startup, they have to know how to work in ambiguity.
Fantastic. So once the entrepreneur gets clarity on his role, how does he grow further? Because a lot of times we have seen challenges in front of entrepreneurs that they were the reason for initiating and giving birth to that enterprise. After some time, they become the reason why the enterprise is not growing further, because they want to delegate the responsibility, but they never want to part away with the authority. So how does one overcome this type of a mindset where he shares not only the authority, not only the responsibility, but also the authority? So what are your thoughts on that?
So actually, gentleman from SPJN, probably you said working on an MBA. We designed an MBA
Family
program
MBA.
for family. No, that's one of the biggest challenges, and we all know several family-owned businesses who struggle.
India is majorly family-owned businesses.
Family-owned businesses, and many of them struggle to make that leap into sort of a more professional-led environment. I, for one, am not that much of a detractor of a family-run business, because all said and done, the Indian environment is a family environment, right? We call strangers uncle from the time we are kids, aunties, uncles. So it's a very, see, the Indian, to my mind, a business or a business environment cannot be divorced from the environment we live in, right? So in an environment where there is really no privacy, in the environment where everybody has, the right to ask you, are you married, why are you not married, how much money you make, these kind of questions, you have to sort of understand that here the entire ecosystem is a family ecosystem. Having said that, I think entrepreneurs who get married to their idea and who fall in love with their idea which they have created, oftentimes are the core reason for stifling that idea, because once that idea has achieved a certain critical mass, then it has to be allowed to flourish. And a startup CEO or an entrepreneur CEO who started it may not be the best person to scale it or to flourish it. The challenge is really in letting go. Challenging letting go of what the person considers. I think every father of a daughter has that challenge at some point of time. The challenge of letting go, or even a son these days, challenging of letting go and saying that he's got to carry on from here. Sometimes it will not go well. Sometimes it will crash, but I think that's part of the game. So I think for an entrepreneur or a startup CEO to remain excited, he must continuously do startups. So once he's taken a startup to a certain scale, he's got to have some other startup which excites him, brings him again to that tempo. Instead of saying that I'm going to take this startup rocket all the way to the moon. So if you want to be Neil Armstrong and light the fire of the rocket and land on the moon, not going to happen.
I think as a business leader, one of the core jobs of a business leader or an entrepreneur is always to keep on making decisions. And most important decisions are decisions related to hiring the right team. Like you have been a startup CEO for 3 enterprises. You have been a startup CEO even for the last assignment that you did with the government on a very large scale, where your success depended on the quality and the type of people that you selected. So how challenging was that, or how is your mindset to recruit the right type of people, and then you are responsible for those people, the top management at least. So after some time you realize that it was the right decision, and sometimes You feel that some of the decisions have gone wrong. So what is your rectification theory on such? And is it wise to have people at the top recruited by you who are smarter than you, but you should be in a position to control them? How does it work actually?
So I think there will be many startup CEOs here, and Rajesh, you are one of them, so you will sort of ratify. When you are a startup CEO, you have to make a lot of compromises on the people you hire. Why would a stud who is working for an MNC leave that and come to you when you are in a startup stage? Right? Why would he give up whatever he is doing and come and jump? So many times I have found that CEOs who have done hiring sort of beat themselves up. That I hired 10 people and only 4 of them flourished. Or only 2 or 3 of them did well and the remaining 6 did not. I think that's a fantastic batting average. Because after all, just look at what you are working with. You are firstly fundamentally working with a very small pull factor. You can't afford to pay the people you are looking for the top dollar. You can't go to a B school and get day one recruitment because you are a startup, you are a nobody. You oftentimes cannot give them anything beyond your dream and your vision and something called an ESOP which will happen at the end of the tunnel, which he also doesn't believe in, you also are not sure of. So at the end of the day, a lot of that hiring is happening purely on personal charisma, on personal come with me and we'll make it happen. So if out of 10 startup hires, even if 1 or 2 fire and they make some meaningful difference, I think the CEO has done a fantastic job. He or she should not calibrate herself against the hiring pattern of an established MNC which goes into day one, has the luxury of conducting interviews, the luxury of giving top of the line pay packet and all of that. The second thing which I think startup CEOs should be aware of is you will have to let certain people go after a certain stage. Because when you are setting up your first team, you have to pretty much manage with whoever comes to you. So even if that person is only a 60% fit, your choice is between 0% and 60%. It is not that you have a choice between a 60 and a 90%. You don't have a 90% person. 90% person is not coming to you. So I think that first period of transition where you go to the first stage of maybe about 8 months, 9 months to a year, depends on various different business cycles. After that first cycle, you will have to let some people go. I used to beat myself in the earlier stages that I made this selection, this was a wrong selection, but because it was my selection and ego also plays in, and men have more ego, so how is my decision wrong? So I will keep investing after a bad decision where I would have realized a long time ago that this person is not fitting and he should be let go. The last point which I truly believe in startup is important, it's better not to have somebody than to have, it's better to manage with 3 people than to have to manage with 5 suboptimal people. So if a choice has to be made between filling a position at a strategic level, few positions have to be very, very strategic. HR is a very strategic position. I truly believe that every startup CEO must invest a lot of time in each and every hire. Because in a startup, you have to remember, if you're a 1,000-man company and 100 people are not performing well, that's 10% of your organization not performing well. But in a 5-man team, if 2 are not performing well, that's 40%. At a nascent stage, the organization will die. So far better to invest that time in saying, okay, marketing also I'll play an additional part, in sales also I will do an additional part, than to say that I'm trying to select the right guy, because you won't have the right guys. The right guys will not start knocking on your door until you become a brand and until you start, sort of getting a name for yourself which will attract these people.
So now the startup entrepreneur is established, he is doing fine business. Now the next challenge in front of him is handling competition. So how do you think competition should be handled? In the armed forces, you shoot down the competition in real terms. In corporate sectors, you have strategies playing around the competition. So what were the strategies that you played when you went into the retail business as a CEO? When you went into the retail business, were your strategies some different than the others? What was your market analysis? What was your market watchdog? And how were you monitoring how your team is handling the competition?
My sense is that the competition, so there is this term called competitive intelligence. I don't know if you've heard of this term, competitive intelligence. And a lot of people confuse it with competitor intelligence. I believe that the real competition for any entrepreneur is not necessarily going to come from a competitor. It'll come from forces which they have not, like, I'll give you an example. If you remember, do you remember the Remington typewriter?
Yes.
Remington typewriter always thought brother typewriter was their competition. Japanese firm would make it cheaper and they would compete against brother. They never saw the PC coming. Can you imagine if you are the owner of Remington typewriter, you are Remington typewriters, you already have every person who needs a PC as your captive customer. He is using a typewriter for God's sake, he has to move to a PC. And yet they never saw the PC coming as competition. Similarly, supermarkets never saw gas stations, outlets, grocery outlets as a competition. So I think the real competition that a startup CEO has to be worried about, or an entrepreneur has to be worried about, is not the competitor. Because I must tell you honestly, the competitor is as imaginative or unimaginative as you are. It is the maverick who is coming in from outside, who will come from a totally different direction. There's a very famous case study, and I'm sure many of you might have read it, that the very famous beer company, I think it's Coors, I'm not sure of the brand, doesn't really matter, which in Africa, especially in Nigeria and a couple of other countries, suddenly saw their market share disappearing. And they were bewildered. What is happening? Why are young people not drinking beer? Not just their beer. They were not drinking anybody else's beer either. They were just going down in beer consumption. And actually they found that the reason was the advent of mobile phones. Now you'd wonder, what has mobile phones got to do with beer? The fact is that the beer drinking was more of a social get-together. So that $20 that this youngster had, he was spending it on a social get-together which was being serviced by beer until the time phones came, because that became the social network. Now beer companies could think of other beer companies as competition and they could keep fighting each other till the cows come home, but they will never identify that the real competition is actually coming from a totally different sphere. So I think the first challenge is to really identify who is your competition. And many times we think that because I am selling houses, anyone else who's selling houses is competition. If I'm selling makeup, anyone else who's doing, but that's not necessarily true. A cosmetic firm may actually get competition from better yoga cleansing of the skin. It may come from somewhere else totally, and unless that ability, see, remember, a startup CEO's core trait has to be the ability to spot opportunities. That's why he's a startup CEO, right? So he must also have the ability to discern competition before he becomes a competitor.
I think the same thing happened with the camera companies. They didn't realize the phones coming in, and Nokia became the largest camera manufacturing company in the world with a mobile phone.
Look what happened to Nokia,
Yes,
and
yes.
Apple, and
Apple
then
came
Samsung.
in, and then Samsung came in. So you need to be alert of what's coming in, and you need to be prepared for the future. That's the way the vision should be. Being able to have the ability to see what's not been seen with naked eyes. I think that's a strategic calculation that one needs to have as an entrepreneur. You spoke that HR needs to play a very crucial role. In many of the companies, I have seen that there are either conflicting team members or there are conflicting teams in the same organization. And that becomes detrimental to the growth of that particular organization. So how does a business leader, after he realizes this conflict, how does he still make them perform and achieve in spite of the shortcomings of no synergy amongst themselves?
So I believe, this is my personal belief, that there is a myth that a lot of people have, that for a team to function effectively, people have to like each other. And I think that's a myth. And I'll tell you why I believe that's a myth. Because in the forces, I have been part of teams, small teams with very special missions, where the members have hated each other. And I may hate a member of the team, but I know that when I go into a mission, this man is my best point guy on my 3 o'clock, because he's really good at that job. So long as team members trust each other's professional competence, they don't necessarily have to like each other. And I think this sort of turning it on a paradigm to say that if I have a team of 20 people, it's not that they have to spend their time hugging each other or loving each other. That's not the aim. The aim is that they must have mutual respect for each other's ability, and they must trust each other on each other's capability. So long as there is that speed of trust which happens within a team. And when I say trust, it doesn't mean I like you. I mean, many times you say this phrase, right? Trust this bloody bugger to mess it up. That's also a form of trust. Because I trust that if I give him this job, he will mess it. So I know the guy's capability. So once a team achieves the speed of trust, then they start forging together as a team and achieving results. And I have found that the best way to forge a team together is to put an ambitious goal out there, which is
wide of the, not an incremental thing, not something to do, if a project happens typically in 18 months, 19 months, then we'll do it in 13 months. That's not ambitious. But to say that we'll do it in 6 months' time, Nano is a great example. So Nano is not a 3 lakh car which has been shrunk into a 1 lakh car. It's a blank sheet of paper from where a 1 lakh car has been made, because it is an audacious goal which has been put in place. So I think if there is an audacious goal, if the team member, and different team members will have different drivers. And I don't think we should pretend that, like for example, the last organization I led, there were people who joined the organization because they wanted to do something for the nation. There are some people who were posted there like any other regular posting. Some people wanted to come there because they wanted a stamp on their CV that they did this project for the government. Various different drivers. So someone is motivated by the national anthem, someone else is motivated by something else. I don't think any CEO can match everybody's motivation into one single motivation and say this is our national purpose. That may be your national purpose, not mine. But for whatever reasons people join, again, take a look at the forces, for example. People join the forces for all sorts of reasons, which range from economic conscription, right down to somebody has seen border and he wants to join the army. But once they have joined, then they work together as a team because the enemy is much larger than any one of them. So my life is at threat because if we don't work together, we both, as they said, that if you don't hang together, you will definitely hang separately one by one. So if you're able to get them into that philosophy, that if you don't become one team, your survival is at stake. Yeah, sure, you will beat him, but you will also be beaten. It doesn't really matter who goes first, both will go. If that is somehow explained and articulated, my sense is teams don't have to like each other to work efficiently. Their working efficiently will make them like each other.
How important is strategy for growth? And if it is important, when you make a strategy, how does one ratify that strategy? Whether this is the right one, it can be made stronger, it can be made better, it can be made different. So how do you strategize, and then how do you ratify that strategy?
So to my mind, there is a place for strategy, there's a place for plan, and there's a place for execution. And I think this is a very old cliche to say that a well-executed average plan is far better than the finest plan which falters on execution. Having said that, there's a very famous story again. A lot of my stories are from the forces because that was my training ground. There's this story about, in the Second World War, the German Air Force was beating the Britishers very badly. And both the British Army and the British Air Force requested their War Department for equipment. And the British Army, the Royal Army, gave the requirement as that these aircrafts are coming and bombing us, so we need searchlights with twice the power and detection equipment with twice the range. And that was their requirement to their War Department. The Royal Air Force framed the same requirement as saying that we need equipment that gives us the ability to detect the enemy aircrafts at the furthest range possible. So the British Army, the Royal Army, got powerful halogen searchlights and the Air Force got the radar. Because of the way they articulated their want. Somebody just articulated as twice of what they have got, whereas another person articulated it as the furthest distance possible. So I think that's the role of strategy. So when a strategic plan is being made, a great deal of time has to be spent to articulate what is it that you want.
Very often that articulation is not done. It is done that ready, fire, and then we'll aim. So this concept of first working on what is it that you desire and fleshing it out, looking at its implications, and then going on a plan. And once a plan is frozen, then going on pure and simple execution. Then there is, it's like, I like to equate it with that Formula One race where you might have noticed that the car comes and stops at the pit stop, and within 8 seconds, the car moves out. Now the pit stop is not the time for somebody to get up and say, actually I have an idea about how we should do this strategy. That should be done in the playing room, because in the pit stop, the pit boss is the boss. So once it comes to the execution stage, then there has to be a ruthlessness in execution.
Once this entrepreneur has successfully delegated his responsibility and authority, the next challenge for him would be monitoring. How would he monitor minimum number of people who are monitoring more number of people under them, and make sure that he has an analysis of what's happening before it's too late and the boat has sunk? So what should be the monitoring mechanism of a business entrepreneur so that it doesn't hit his company in a negative way?
So I think the first understanding that any entrepreneur CEO should have is that the love and the passion and the sort of attachment that he has to his company, she has to recognize that his rank and file will not have that. So many CEOs here would get angry if their office phone is not answered by the second ring. Sounds familiar?
Yes.
You get irritated. That irritation level is not going to happen to Mr. Sharma who's sitting there in the office for whom it's a pay. He will only do it if there is a process in the organization that the third ring, if it is not picked up, the person closest to the phone gets sacked. I mean, I'm just using a sort of a metaphor. But unless that process comes into place, it's ideologically and philosophically foolish for a CEO to imagine that the love that he has for his baby, the neighbor will also have that love for the baby. He will not. He will love his baby. Why should he love your baby? Right? And his baby is his family. His baby is catching that chartered bus at 5 o'clock because if he does not make it to the chartered bus, he will not be able to get home. So expecting a CEO who expects that I'll be able to transfer my enthusiasm and my commitment 100% is not going to happen. So he has to very clearly recognize that beyond this, I have to depend on processes. Then he must check his own processes. I don't know how many times. A CEO a long time ago taught me this trick. He said, call your own office. Call your own office and see the response that you get as if you were a customer. And that will tell you a lot more about your organization than the PowerPoint presentation that these guys keep showing. All these department heads will keep showing everything is hunky-dory, all is good and everything. Call your own office and you will realize if your call is being picked up in the 17th ring and you say, I want this product, and say, ek minute thero, put you on hold, pata karta hun, this, that, or kal phone karna. Then you realize that the process belief that you have is actually not a true belief. And it's a fact of life. It's a fact of life that the pristinity with which you take pride in creating something will deteriorate as it goes down. The challenge of the CEO is to make sure that it does not deteriorate to an unacceptable degree. It will deteriorate, but it should not deteriorate to a degree where it becomes unacceptable.
When does he plan expansions? How does he plan expansions and why should he plan expansions?
Expansion obviously has to be planned for the simple reason that if you've got a team of say 15 people, 20 people, all these 20 people are expecting to become SBU heads and they are wanting to grow in life. And they're wanting to grow in life, their desire to grow in life is just like anybody's desire to grow in life. So if you have to, sort of keep the organization moving, then obviously growth has to be there. There is no getting around it.
So I know a couple of entrepreneurs who say why expansion should happen. I am achieving this level of satisfaction now. Adding more to the expansion will add more to my troubles and take away peace from me. So why should I expand? So what should be the motivation for such entrepreneurs? Because I feel every country, every society or every family can be built by entrepreneurship. They are self-motivated people who want to expand. And when an entrepreneur expands, he is actually doing God's work. He is providing opportunities, products and services to the entire society. So entrepreneur by default should always have the growth strategy. How do you motivate entrepreneurs who say that no, why should I expand? This is sufficient for me. So how do you motivate such entrepreneurs? That's why I asked, why should I expand?
So it's a good question, and the answer is there in the question that the moment an entrepreneur decides that this is enough and I don't want to grow anymore, he has just signed out of the entrepreneur club. He has just, he may not articulate it, but that's what he's done effectively. It's like a bachelor who says, I'm going to get married, and he's not a bachelor anymore. That's it. So the point is that unless the organization that the person is responsible for is constantly growing, he doesn't qualify to, because by definition, the entrepreneur word means that you will pursue enterprise. You will be constantly striving to open new frontiers and cross, whether the frontier is in number of customers or number of products or geographical region or sliding down the pyramid, going up the value chain, whatever it is. But without this movement happening, the person doesn't qualify to be an entrepreneur. So he can be called chairman emeritus, he can be called the founder, but he definitely has lost the entrepreneur status. He is retired from the entrepreneur club.
Globalization is a word which has affected people who understand what is globalization, and it has also affected people who don't understand the meaning of the word globalization. How, according to you, should an enterprise or should an entrepreneur take advantage of the word globalization in actual real terms. So there are benefits, there are disadvantages also of globalization. How as an entrepreneur would you decide to take advantage of globalization as a business strategy?
So, I mean, I think Indians are definitely far better equipped to understand and appreciate globalization for 2 or 3 reasons. Because at the end of the day, if you have to define globalization, what does it mean? It means that many countries, your markets are open beyond your own boundaries, beyond your own sovereign boundaries, beyond your own countries, beyond your own sort of country. That is, to my word, globalization. To my understanding. If that be the case, I think India has always been equipped for it because we are a subcontinent. I mean, frankly, if you look at the diversity of our country, if you take a boy from Kashmir and another boy from, say, Kerala, one person, a girl from Northeast and someone from Rajasthan, and put a German in between, they have as much in common with the German as they have with each other. Because they don't look like each other, they don't speak the same language, they don't eat the same food. Matter of fact, India is possibly the only country where in the Ramayana, Ram is worshipped in the north and Ravan is worshipped in the south. So with that diversity, we are already equipped for a global mindset, except we don't think of it globally because we think this is all one single country. But the training and the DNA has taught us how to work with a South Indian, how to work with a North Indian, how to be assertive and aggressive in certain cities, how to be passive in other places. So we understand that we need to sing a different tune in different markets. We already know that. The second, I think Indians and many communities of Indians, communities by themselves, not just individuals, have been very, very entrepreneurial globally. Way before the internet and cell phones, you hear stories of these Sikhs from Punjab, they sit inside a container and reach Australia and they in 40s. So that even without realizing what is the thousands and thousands of people who went to the Gulf literally swam to the Gulf. I mean, they got off boats. And if you speak to people from Kerala, they'll tell you about 30 years ago, there's so many people. That is true global entrepreneurship, where you're jumping off a ship and hoping that you'll find the shore and make something. So I think we are calibrated for it. This opportunity which is now opened up in terms of connectivity, in terms of markets, in terms of services that you can render across the globe, it's only a natural extension. It's a natural extension of our innate ability to prosper in other places. That's why a city like Bombay, we see the diversity from every part of India coming here and prospering. Because I think that concept of globalization is already there in us. We just need to sort of remember that it's not just limited to your own boundaries, it can be taken to global boundaries.
And anyways, India is a world in a country itself. With the kind of population that we have, 1/6 of human race is Indians. So that itself is a huge marketplace.
Bombay is the population of Israel. So
Absolutely, fantastic. I think we are coming to the fag end before I open it up to the entrepreneurs to ask you questions. But before I do that, I have one last question. A very important role that a business entrepreneur, a businessman plays today, a business owner plays today is organizing funds, is raising funds. As CEO of a company, you make presentations to convince the top management to release budgets. As in the armed forces, you convince them. With the government department, you have to convince them. What I want to drive as a point is, each person today needs funds for expansion, needs funds for survival. He needs to keep making presentations to different organizations. It might be a banker, it might be a private equity holder, supporter, it might be anybody. You need to do a presentation and you need to convince the other guy why you need the money, and the person needs to believe in you that you are going to take away 100 rupees from him and multiply and give it back to him. Multiply and give it back to the source from where the funds come. So this is one role which every entrepreneur is trying to play. He might not be proficient in that, but he has to play it. So what are your tips in such a situation?
So let's just step back a little bit and basically address this question in a different way, which I think will be a broader way of addressing it, is how does a person sell? Because after all, when you're seeking funds also you're selling. And private equity, you get so many bright guys who come from these nice colleges and all. But essentially some of them manage to sell themselves, their idea, their concepts, and so many others don't manage to sell it. So I don't think an eBay was an original idea. I don't think Google was it's how they managed to sell it better and get better funding. So it's again a question of sales. How do you manage to sell? Now there, I believe that in any kind of a sale, there are in any organization itself, in one single organization itself, in one single sale itself, there are 4 kinds of people you are selling to. So there will always be a person who is the economic buyer. And that economic buyer is the person who decides that for this 100 rupees investment, I am okay with 120% returns, or I am okay with returns of nothing but a feel-good factor in terms of CSR, because the valuation may not necessarily be in money, it could be in various other things, right? But he is the economic buyer. There is a champion buyer in the organization who wants to champion that cause, not necessarily from you. He may champion that cause and the person may end up buying somebody else's, your competitor's stuff, but he will champion that cause. The third buyer is a technical buyer. The technical buyer will always try to demonstrate how much he understands about that thing, and it's more of a technical headbutting. It's got nothing to do, he doesn't have the economic clout, he doesn't necessarily believe in it, but he's a technical buyer whom you have to get on your side and convince that yes, from a technology point of view or from state of art point of view, your idea is better. And finally, you have the user buyer who is going to use your service or your product. Only thing that person is interested in, right now I go home at 5:30, will your service and solution make it 6:30 or 4:30? That's it. He is not interested. Now, each one of these stakeholders has a very important part to play in the entire sales cycle, whether it's selling for funds, selling for solutions, selling for experimentation, selling for giving it a try, selling to become your first anchor customer. All these 4 avatars will be found there. And I think CEOs need to make a distinction of the pitch to each one of them. The second, I think, and a more crucial point is, decision makers are also of different types. There are certain kinds of decision makers who like to take big, bold decisions. They want to do it for the first time. If somebody else has done it, he is not interested in it. The moment I make these words, you know 1 or 2 people I'm talking of, and straight away, somebody in the audience will name, yeah, someone like this person, larger than life, he'll buy aircrafts, then he'll buy something else, he'll do this, those kind of people. There are some other decision makers who will make a decision only after careful calibration, who else has done it, what is the rigor, has it been tried and tested. Now, what the CEO or rather his sales team has to do is to make sure that he is aligning his pitch or her pitch to the kind of decision making that the decision maker follows. So for example, and I want to tell you a very real anecdote, this really happened. So many years ago, about 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I was advising the Israeli Homeland Security Department, and they had brought a team of about 40 Israeli companies who work on technology to Bombay. We did a roadshow in Bombay and we did a roadshow in Delhi. The audience was 200 CIOs and head of IT departments. Now, you had these Israeli companies who came and gave their pitches about not cutting edge technology, but bleeding edge technology. That this is fantastic and, bleeding edge technology and all of that stuff. And you had this 200 general managers, IT and CIOs listening to them. And in the end of this 2-day, very, very hectic and very intense and very interactive conversation, nothing happened, no sales. At the end of it, nothing is happening. Now, if you analyzed it, what was going on was that the profile of IT managers who become GM ITs and eventually become CIOs. They only get known in the company, their name is heard in the company if the IT system is not working. So they, naturally, you say IT wala kidhar hai? Only when the IT system is not working. When it's working, you don't remember the guy, right? Now, they come from a grooming, most of them, they come from a grooming that it has to be tried and tested, it should not fail. And there's a famous saying, nobody gets fired for buying the big blue. So they come from that environment. Now he is listening to this bleeding edge guy. So what he's hearing is, I have just got a doctorate in surgery and you are my first patient. That's what he's hearing. So he is thinking that I'm exciting this guy by telling him that you're my first customer and you will be experimenting this. That guy is hearing guinea pig, guinea pig, guinea pig. Now, when you have this kind of a communication happening, if the sales guy wonders, why did I fail? Then the answer lies in 2 mistakes that we make. First mistake we make is we believe that the decision maker has the same decision making cycle as we have. Not true, not necessarily true. Definitely not true. The second mistake we make is we have one canned pitch that we carry to each and every decision. The same 83 slides in the same sequence, which will be carried to everybody, Whereas that is really not the requirement. Some people like broad brushstrokes, they like ambitious plans, some people want granularity, they want how each milestone will be dealt with, they want execution details to that level. I think orienting the sale to the recipients or listeners' decision-making cycle is a far more successful way than dressing it up and flowering it up and padding it up in any other way.
Fantastic. I think we should all give a round of applause. Somebody has a question. Let's begin with the questions. Yes.
What can businesses learn from the military? From the military. It seems like our culture is always walking around.
Naved is related to he's Naved Jaffrey, he's come from the US. Let me disclose, these are all family friends. Just a few crore people will watch it on the YouTube. Naved is related to the US services, military services, and he's into a variety of businesses world over, including real estates and technology. So that's Naved.
I'm obviously biased because I believe I got my MBA from the Indian Army. Because, I was telling you a story a long time ago when the first organization I had joined, my predecessor was from Harvard. And why don't you sit down? So, the question that was asked by one of the press reporters when I was sort of taking over is that your predecessor was from Harvard, where have you done your MBA? And the answer kind of came from the gut that I did my MBA in Siachen Glacier. If I could take men into battle without ESOP, pay hikes and all of that, we'll figure out a way. So the point is, I believe that the fundamental reason for existence for any business, and therefore by definition for any business leader, is that there are more contenders fighting for less resources, right? That's the fundamental reason. And that is the essence of war. Because if you look at any technology which has originated, any format which has originated, its origin lies in war. Teamwork is the first time 40 men from different tribes want to take down one mammoth. And they have to work together, they have to nominate one bugger as a leader even if they don't like him. Because he's the guy who will go and taunt that mammoth in the front and attract it, because he has that daring to do that. And so first time teamwork happens is because of war.
First time any sort of a communication happens, first time you decide that when I say this, it means left, and you say, because you have to have a common vocabulary, it is because you are in conflict. The technologies that we use right now, radio, wireless, X-ray, internet, aircraft, all have originated because humans have conflicted with each other. Because it's only when human beings fight for survival that the most enterprising of the community come up. The most funding comes. The most, nobody would have made a nuclear bomb if there was no war happening. Nuclear power would not have been harnessed if people were not looking to kill each other. So, in many ways, pretty much every aspect, I must tell you, when I first came into the corporate sector, I found more military jargon in the corporate sector. Buddy, operation room, war room, this, that. In the military, we don't call it that. So, interestingly, I found that there is already a lot of the principles of management, the principles of operational command. Besides, you must remember one thing, and let me take you, so anybody here who believes that they are running a very, very complex organization, very, very complex system, I would urge you to sometimes study elements of military history. It will really help. And one of the things that you should read upon is, say, for example, the D-Day landings. So, 1944, 6 June actually, 1944, 200,000 men have to cross the English Channel in 3 days' time in all of you must have seen Saving Private Ryan, many of us you must have seen. Yeah. You know the chaos. 42 different countries providing troops there. Many people don't even speak the English language. There were people who were fighting there who had no idea why the hell I am in France. What is the purpose of my fight here? And yet under one unified command, without computer, Excel sheets, internet, mobile phones, the operation was commanded and controlled with success. Obviously there is a framework at work there, and that framework is working. So I think there is incredible learning that can be taken from the forces. It is how that is adapted to the requirements of each organization, which is basically the last mile connectivity challenge. But there is, whether it's communication, man management, strategy, operations, briefing, simple briefing, there is incredible learning. Because the situation that you are facing, or any one of us is facing here, some army, some unit, somewhere in the world has faced it and solved it. So rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, there is a potential for learning from that. So I think it's unlimited in terms of the amount of.
Any more questions? Yes, Sidhu.
Good evening, sir. My question is on expansion. Whether an enterprise should expand in the same field or should go in some different field. For example, a technical business should expand in technical field only or should enter real estate or hotel, or because opportunities are everywhere. And
So here the real estate you have to enter because everyone seems to have entered it. If not real estate, then interior. Because half the crowd here. I really don't know the answer to that. I think the answer to that is unique to every individual and every business.
Or can diversification be backward integration?
So, I mean, there is a pro and con for everything. I think there is a diversification of businesses because there's integration happening, and there are some classic examples of large corporates. One of the largest corporates in India has basically done backward and forward integration and captured the entire value chain. So that is. The other is to say that, sometimes you are in a business because that's a business, but your passion is somewhere else. And sometimes that passion drives you to a completely unrelated kind of a business, and there is diversification there also, because if one part of the raft sinks, it's not that the entire raft will sink, because it's a different kind of a business. So I think there are pros and cons in both sides, and this is one of those answers that which is the better road to take, the right or the left, I really don't know. It will depend a lot on the circumstances, it will depend on opportunities, and sometimes life has a way that opportunity becomes your strategy. So I remember once there was a IT consulting firm we were working with, and the first major order came from Qatar Petroleum. So suddenly we became an oil and gas specialist. Because if 90% of your revenue is coming from one business, then you might as well label yourself a specialist in that business, right? But immediately after that, if there was some other assignment which came in a different one, and we were able to flip it into that. So I think this is an answer which is very, very situational and very, very personal also.
Yes, Rohit, you have a question.
Yeah, Captain, a completely different question. Since you come from the armed forces and patriotism on high there, when you look at the people at large, we see that there is no patriotism at that level. So a lot of people have discussed that we should make the military training compulsory. So what is your take on this?
Matter of fact,
We just discussed in the car.
In the car. So I don't think that the military is running a course on patriotism. I don't think so. I don't think that No, I'm not being frivolous here. I'm being pretty serious here. I think, by the way, this idea was mooted not just in India. It was mooted in Britain, and the British army turned it down. They said, we don't want tourist soldiers. We don't want people who have been sent here by order ki ek saal kisi tarike se katna hai yahan pe and you have to suffer this 1 year. We want people who have come here as career soldiers, who want to make their soldiering. And I'm not very sure that putting a guy in a uniform is the only way to make him a patriot. That's not true. Because frankly, that session that Rajesh spoke about, leadership at 26,000 feet, it's a session based on Siachen Glacier. You all have heard of Siachen Glacier? Yeah, of course. Interestingly, what happens is when I ask many of the people who harbor that view, that why do you think our soldiers fight in Siachen? By and large, the answers would be nationalism, patriotism, flag, training, love for the country, love for the citizen. These are the answers that come. Then I put the map of India on the board and I ask any one of the audience to come and say, if you believe he is doing it for you, just point out where is he doing it. So Siachen everyone has heard. Then I ask them to come and say on the map, where is Siachen? Where is Kargil? And I'm surprised that most people have no idea where it is. So patriotism cannot be outsourced. You can't say, I will go and do a capitalist business, you become a patriot. It can't be done. I think patriotism by definition has to be there in every citizen. And it doesn't mean that you have to go to the army for 1 year to come back as a patriot. It doesn't work that way. I think patriotism is something that a love for the country that you feel, or love for immediately your own community, that every individual has to feel in their own fields, not necessarily a job profile or a job description only for the armed forces.
Yes, Kunal.
Very good evening, Captain. I have two questions for you. What was your motivation to shift from the military to the corporate and from corporate to government? And my second question is, as a startup entrepreneur, you get a fixed funding and then you give the return to the investor. After that, you are working and he's getting the profits. How do you make the investor work after this point?
So let me answer your second question first. I think when you sign up with an investor, I think both of you know what is the exact marriage you're getting into. He's taking a risk on you and you are blowing his money, right? Now, if the risk pans out and you actually start earning him back money, I don't think that's the point to turn around and say, hey, by the way, I'm making money for you, so let's give you less. I think that's a risk and reward return, which is a straightforward equation. I think the answer that you're looking for is to choose the right investor. So you must know this phrase very well. And there are some investors who put in what is called dead money, which means they will only give you the money. But some investors are strategic investors because they will be able to bring business to you. They will be able to provide you with captive business that they have, or they will be able to. They may have several companies in their portfolio, each one of whom has the ability to do business with each other, and he can actually mandate that. He can mandate that you will take your housekeeping services from that company because I have an investment in that company. Of course, provided they give you the same quality. And so I think the selection of the investor, whether the investor is bringing in live money or strategic money or dead money, is the key. If you're looking for an investor who is going to give you dead money because he gives it to you faster, easier, because he's your uncle or whatever reason, and you get that money, then expecting him to work for that money is wrong, because he's not designed to be a strategic investor. So if you have this call to make, I think the call should be made at the time when you're taking the money, not after you have taken the money and realize that actually you are sitting on a winning pile.
Next question. Yes.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Kanav Arora. So as we were talking about the entrepreneurs, there are two types. Like we were discussing, one who does like crazy things. They have just a vision and they'll just jump into the pond and see where does it goes. They'll figure out a way. The another type is they plan it very strategically, see the pros and cons, drops many ideas which could have been very successful just to see some flaws in that. So my question is like, what are the pros and cons between these two types? Because both the traits could not be in the same person, and being an investor, whom should we bet on?
So, firstly, if I gave you the impression that the first person goes ahead and does things about which he has no idea, that's not true. He has a very clear idea. His style or her style of approaching that problem is very different. That person wants to make a big splash, wants to, sort of stake a claim and announce that he or she has arrived. Doesn't mean he's being foolhardy. Doesn't mean he's being foolish. Again, there are enough successes. I mean, Richard Branson is a great success. His style of, doing business is the style I was referring to, by the way. You guys must have thought of someone else. So, yeah, I said aircrafts and all of that. Why were you thinking of someone else? I didn't say liquor, remember? So there are enough successes in all the models. And I don't think it is a particular style of leadership which is successful. I don't think so. I think there'll be enough champions who will be the slow thinker types. The type that you described is called a skeptic, who will try to shoot holes into every business idea, who will try to reverse the logic, be the devil's advocate to see the kind of rigor that you have put in. I'm not very sure there is some equation which says that if you give it to a charismatic, your investment will be better, or to a skeptic, it will be better. I think if you are the investor and you're investing, it would make most synergistic sense to invest it in a personality which is similar to yours. So at least you won't get the shocks. Because if you are a thinker who thinks 10 times before putting an investment, and you realize that your CEO to whom you have given that money has gone ahead and invested it, overnight, then it will give you a lot of shocks. So it would be a better idea to at least align yourself with the kind of decision making that you are comfortable with in the portfolios or the individuals that you invest in.
Next question. Yes, Vivek.
In Israel, the youth have to compulsorily go to the army. Do you think that has shaped youth in a better way in the country, or should it come to India?
So, this Israel and India comparison has continued for many, many years. And I mean, my views on it are slightly different from what... So here's the way I look at it. That when an Israeli soldier finishes his 2 to 3 years of tenure, 3 years for men and 2 years for women, the country he comes to vacation to is India. I would rather be the country they come to vacation to than become the country from where we go for vacation. That's my philosophy. So I believe that the format that we follow in India is good for India. The format that they follow in Israel is good for them. Israel is a country which is surrounded by 6 hostile countries. At the narrowest point, there are, I think, about 18 kilometers, if I'm not wrong. There you have to give instant decision making to that man on the spot, because if he doesn't decide on the spot, the enemy will cross the country. You can't do that, a similar kind of empowerment at the last mile level necessarily in India. In Israel, you can follow a philosophy that when in doubt, shoot, because 90% chances it is the enemy. You can't do that in India, because in India, I mean, just look at the differences of facial features, and you will realize that you can't identify people by their country. So I think what works for them works for them. Their scale is different, their size is different, their political environment is different, and what they can get away with is very different. I think we are a very different nation. The kind of measured steps that we take are role models, and we can't be seen as somebody who swings out at the lowest, the easiest provocation. I don't think that's a wise thing. The second view I have, and again this has its own set of controversies, is very often people talk that we must look at the Israeli solution. So if Israelis had a solution, why isn't it been solved? It's been 60 years. Why is it not solved? Right? It's still in conflict. So I think there's great thing to learn from that. There's no doubt we must learn from any country. Why Israel? We can learn things from Sri Lanka, we can learn from Nepal, we can learn from any country. But to say that because it works there, therefore it will work here, I'm not very sure that's a good idea. It may look nice and it may seem glamorous, but I'm not very certain that philosophies and ideologies that work in another country will necessarily, I mean, look at our own nation. The way a manager manages in Punjab, if he tried that in Kerala, do you think he'll be a success? I mean, in the forces you learn that. I mean, there are certain regiments which are very rough regiments, where if you don't use Ma Bhan, you're not supposed to be, I mean, you're a wimp of an officer. If you go to a Madras battalion and try to do the same thing there, I mean, the guy will come in tears in front of you, कि साहब हमको गाली दिया, क्या गाली दिया, bloody बोला, bloody गाली नहीं होता, नहीं साहब गाली होता. Because in his head, if he's called bloody, it's abuse. So I don't think we can take a formula which works somewhere else, and just because it works there, port it to our environment, say it will work here as well. I think what we have to look at are the underlying elements of that formula. So if the underlying element of what you were getting at is that the nation has a program whereby every youth is inducted into a national service, which happens to be military there. Here it can be working in villages. Anybody who wants to become a doctor has to go for 2 years to work in rural villages. Anybody who wants to become a teacher has to work in rural. It can be any form of national service. Doesn't have to be military. We already have a very large army, and for every 20 vacancies there are 2,000 applicants. So we don't need to follow that model. But we have a problem in doctors, we have a problem in chemists, we have a problem in hygiene, teachers. That's the area of national service we should look at. So if you're saying national service, I buy the point. If you're saying national service like Israel, I don't agree with that.
Yes, we have got last 2 questions to go. Sylvester, and then there is one more behind.
Good evening, Captain. At the outset, thank you for taking time and being with us. I have a very simple question. You've shared very many inspiring anecdotes. What inspires you?
You have to speak the truth.
You have to speak the truth. I don't know. I think different things at different times. I mean, I don't want to make it individual to me because you promised no personal questions. That's why I didn't answer this gentleman's first question. I answered the second one, not the first one. I think we all find different inspirations at different times for different things that we do. Sometimes it is the glory of being recognized. Sometimes it is the achievement of having done something which people thought is not doable. Sometimes it is living up to somebody else's dream. It could be your child's dream or your parents' dream. Sometimes it's something that you feel passionate about because you have been personally affected by it. And I don't believe that for everything that you do, the inspiration has to be the same one or singular one. It can be different inspirations for different things. And I'm sure, I mean, in many walks of life, you may have an inspiration for joining in a physical fitness program, which may be very different for an inspiration for teaching the children of some people who are underprivileged. So I think the formula is not so much to say how do I find inspiration for what I am doing?
The formula should be, how do I do something that I feel naturally inspired about? And I think there are plenty of opportunities for that. So rather than trying to force fit an inspiration into something that you are fundamentally not inspired about, far better to find something that you are truly inspired about and build your, 8 hours around that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, one last question. Yes, sir.
As you said, most of the Indians are very great entrepreneurs, and you found that most of the people who have gone abroad are doing extremely well in those countries compared to, because of the infrastructure problem, the bureaucracy and all, we are not able to do what we entrepreneurs skills the people have. Compared to the China, what you see our future in another 10 years, how you feel the entrepreneurs flourish in this country? What you foresee the country as a whole?
So again, please have a seat. I think the definition of an entrepreneur, by definition, is that the person is able to work under the constraint and with resources that are provided. That is the definition of entrepreneurship. It is not, if I had conditions like China, like Germany and Australia put together in one country, then I would be a great entrepreneur. That is not a condition of entrepreneurship. Matter of fact, some of the greatest entrepreneurs you would find, even in India, you would find them in extremely hostile environments. You'll find entrepreneurship in Srinagar, in Kashmir, in Northeast, in Naxal-infested areas, where absolutely nothing is available, and that's where entrepreneurship is required. Otherwise, managers will do. We churn out, I don't know how many thousand managers from B schools every year. They would do well enough if all the infrastructure and conditions would be. So I think now, wishing that we were like China, because you see some parts of China. Similarly, like when you said, let me give you an analogy, you said people who go abroad do well. It's only people who do well about whom you hear. You don't hear about the people who don't do well, right? Like Bombay, I'm sure every day there must be hundreds of people coming here into Bombay railway station thinking I am the next Shah Rukh Khan. But you hear of only one Shah Rukh Khan's journey from Delhi to Bombay. Now that must not beguile us into thinking if I took a train from Delhi to Bombay, I will become a Shah Rukh Khan. So just because you will have China-like conditions, China also has its own problems. If you look at the social problems of China, where an entire generation doesn't have a concept of an uncle or an auntie, they don't have a concept because there is no uncle and auntie. There is no first cousin, there is no second cousin. There is a very sort of transactional relationship between children and parents. Now, are you sure that those are the downsides you will be taking for having a bridge that gets built fast and all of that? I'm not saying that it has to be a package deal, but I'm saying that entrepreneurship essentially means you have to manage within the constraints provided to you. That is the hallmark of an entrepreneur. Not saying that if these 8 conditions were changed, then I would be a great entrepreneur. I don't think that doesn't qualify to my mind for an entrepreneur.
Yes, the last question.
I have to ask this. We are the largest importers of arms in the world.
Largest importer of?
Arms, the
Arms,
defense.
yeah.
And we have 22 active and passive conflicts within the borders. And
22
around-
what?
Conflicts, active conflicts.
Conflicts, yeah.
Around the borders and within the borders, active and passive conflicts. What is your advice for the entrepreneurs here to make money by supplying to the Defense Department and working with them? Because we kind of walk around eggshells when we talk about defense and supplying to the defense, and it seems like you're no longer passive or you're a violent person. So what is your advice for that?
No,
Encashing the opportunities in the defense industry is what he means.
So,
how can entrepreneurs encash that?
So I'm just going to lay out the opportunities, and how you encash that is basically depending on the kind of businesses you are in. But the fact is that, and these are all public information, whatever I'm telling you is there in the newspapers, that India has got a business pipe, or rather purchase pipeline of something to the tune of $30 billion over the next 20 years. Because pretty much every arm or every equipment that we have, whether it's tanks, artillery guns, naval ships, aircraft, it has come to its end of its cycle, and we have to, India as a nation. So India would probably be the biggest buyer of weapons and arms barring China, I would say the biggest buyer for the next 20 odd years. So huge business.
The second part, and which is more interesting for Indian businessmen, is that there is an offset policy. I don't know if you are aware of it, but the offset policy essentially says that if you are selling India 100 million worth of equipment, then 40 million to 60 million, depending on what that equipment is, has to be sourced from India. Now, I think the real challenge for India is to have that capability to service that offset market, right? Because if you talk of a gun system, we don't have the metallurgy to make that. We don't have the high precision engineering to. I mean, we have barely started making cars 10 years ago, right? So making fighter jets and fighter aircrafts and sophisticated equipment will take a long time. And I think that's where the business opportunity lies for not just necessarily arms businesses. By the way, because most expertise which you
gather in meeting high-end requirements of a weapon system has many, many other ancillary uses. So if you know high precision metallurgy for a gun barrel, you can also make cylinders for aircraft engines. It's the same technology. So I think if somebody has that vision to say that we've got a $30 billion hole, 50% of which has to be plugged by Indian businesses, you're talking about a $15 billion opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years, which Indian firms can sort of leverage. And again, it doesn't have to be the large firms, because no large firm manufactures the entire weapon system by itself. There are 7 to 8 tiers. So a fighter aircraft has somebody making the engine, somebody makes the cooling for the engine, someone makes something else for that. So I think there is that whole value chain which can win. Obviously, this has to be a much more sort of nationally, strategically aligned under the aegis of a FICCI or a CII or some such forum. But I think the opportunity definitely exists there.
So friends, with that we conclude the questions for the evening. Let us all give a round, loud clap for Captain Raghu, who has been brilliant. And I would like to thank him on behalf of everybody to having made it here for the evening. But before we leave, we need to do something important. I would like to request Shugra to come up and do the honors, a memento for Captain Raghu.